Hi friends, this is Tiina and welcome to my new video. In this video we are going to be painting this vibrant, warm autumnal landscape and we're going to paint a lot of trees and some mountains. But let's get into the video right now, and I'm going to be using a Rembrandt watercolor journal that was kindly gifted to me by Royal Talens. I really like the texture in this notebook and I love the paper, so we're going to use that. And we're going to start the whole painting process by first taking some washi tape and just taping the edges of the painting. And yeah, I love a sharp edge. If you don't have to do this step, but I do love a good satisfying tape peel in the end and seeing the whole painting come to life. I always love to start my paintings with a good sketch beforehand. It doesn't have to be really detailed or anything, but I just love to see the composition and where things should be located in the painting, so it's a little bit easier to start painting. As you can see, there is a reference photo that I'm using for this painting in the corner. It is from Unsplash and I will have it linked in the description. I used a reference photo pretty loosely, but while I was sketching, I was mainly focusing on the mountains, so when I start painting them, it's easier to know where I should be placing all the paint. And yeah, that was pretty much it. I made a pretty loose sketch like I said. And you can make it more detailed if you want to, but of course if you are using gouache like me, most of the details are going to be covered anyway, so there's no need to make super detailed sketch here in the beginning. I will have all of my used products and all of the shades that I use for my paints down in the description, but I'm just quickly going to go through them so you know what kind of colors I used for this painting. I only used gouache from Royal Talens and I mainly use white, raw sienna, raw umber, yellow, vermilion, ultramarine deep, black intenso, and olive green. First, I mix this really light gray color. As you can see, I'm just mixing a little bit of black into my white paint, and then I'm also taking some of that away and mixing some more white into that so we get the sky color in my painting. Sadly, I didn't film all of my color mixing process in this video, but I will try to do better next time. I did not really think about including that in this one, but yeah, I will definitely try to include that more in the next videos. But yeah, we are now painting the sky of my painting, and like I said, we are using the light gray color where I added a bit more white into it, so we get this really nice gloomy light gray color. And I'm just trying to mix it as evenly as I possibly can, and I'm using my kind of small flat brush that I have from Etchr Lab. Then I'm starting to work with the mountains of this painting, and I'm using three main colors for them. And the first one is the sky colored mixed in with a little bit of black to create this medium gray color, and then I'm also using the darker gray that I mixed first in my palette where you saw that a little while ago. And that's going to be my shadow part for this mountain. And then I will also use the sky color, which is of course the lightest shade in this mountain. And I will just go ahead and use my damp brush to also mix all of them together a little bit more, because of course if you look at a mountain, it doesn't really often have these super harsh lines anywhere. Things are way more blended, so that's what I'm trying to do as well. And while I'm also adding the colors, I'm looking at the reference photo loosely again, but I'm also not the best person at painting mountains, so that's why I'm kind of looking back at the reference photo a little bit more, at least, you know, so that I can notice some little details in the reference photo and I can see how mountains normally look. So again, I'm just going in with my damp brush and just mixing all of those colors together a little bit more. And even if your painting looks a little bit weird at this point, just remember we're going to be painting a lot more in this painting. So even if it looks a little bit weird at this point, when we are going to be adding some more of the mountains and some more color in this painting, it will most likely look really normal and you won't see any weird details in this one. So now we are starting to add the sky color in this painting, and I especially added it close to the edge of the mountain, so it will kind of have this more blended look into the sky, and it will almost look a little bit misty and foggy because of course this is this autumnal kind of moody painting, so I think that fit the painting really nicely. I'm also not being really careful with the colors. I'm just kind of mixing and adding them everywhere. And at this point, I started to add this kind of brownish color into the mountain to create this more autumnal look. And again, I was just blending it to the other colors as well. And when I was mixing my colors for this painting, I pretty much just always thought about adding the lighter gray that I mixed first into all of the colors that I was mixing to create this more hazy and misty look, because I didn't want to add any colors that were too harsh. So when we get lower down in the mountain, I'm starting to add a bit more darker colors, as you can see. And I'm trying to do this gradually, but I noticed I went a bit too harsh at some points, so I tried to fix that more in the end. But yeah, I'm just adding some shades of green, brown, and even blue in this mountain. I was struggling with the colors a little bit here in the beginning at least, and I was just covering some parts up and just working on some parts really for a long time, but I think in the end everything worked out. And of course, when we are working with gouache, it's a really forgiving medium, so you can go over multiple parts multiple times if you want to, and it doesn't really look too bad in my opinion. But of course, if you are able to make everything perfect on the first try, that's great. As you can see, throughout the whole time that I was painting in these mountains, I was trying to make sure that it has a lot of color variation, so none of the colors that I'm adding into, or none of the mountains that I'm painting, just have one color in them. And I think this is a good tip if you're painting any kind of ground, even if you are painting something on top like grass, or like in this case forest or trees, it will still look a lot better if you make the ground multiple colors and you will blend colors together and just make it look a lot more interesting instead of just having one color, because if you just add one color, it will look less realistic and maybe like one-dimensional. I'm darkening the mountains that are in the front quite a bit, and as you can see in the reference photo, this is the part that will have the trees on top, and it will look a lot more darker than the mountains in the back. But I was kind of struggling knowing what kind of colors I should choose, because in the reference photo it looked almost blue, so I started mixing some blue into my darker color as well. And I tried to keep in mind that the edges of the mountains should still be a little bit blended and almost have that misty look that we have in the mountains in the back. And as you can see, I'm here just covering some parts of the mountain that I just made because it just looked a little bit too harsh. So yeah, you can go back and just fix any mistakes you made beforehand with gouache. The haziness or smoothness I'm creating by mixing things together with my damp brush is also really good in paintings like these, where some of the elements are kind of in the background. Of course, if things are closer to you, it might be better to create more harsh and straight lines and more details, but elements like these mountains are of course really far away, so creating this messy and hazy look is so much better, because of course none of the details in these far away mountains would be really sharp anyway. So yeah, just a little tip for you if you're working on any elements that are really far back. The way that I'm blending with my damp brush usually is by taking some water on my brush and then just tapping most of it off in a paper towel so that my brush is just damp and it's not soaking wet. And then I just go over some of the spots I want to be blended a little bit, but I don't push my brush too hard on the paper. I just try to do it pretty smoothly and in this messy way, so it picks up some of the color and blends it to the other one, but it's not the best way to create your perfect blended gradients or anything. It's just good for these kind of paintings when you don't really want that really smooth and blended look, but you just want some haziness and some blended details here and there. So I would recommend doing that, and I think it works with all kinds of brushes, but I usually like to use round brushes instead of flat, because I think flat brushes usually tend to take more color with them and it might look a little bit streaky in the end. So yeah, round brushes are my go-to brushes for this kind of blending, but definitely experiment and see how your brushes work and how you like to do it best. The next part that I'm working on was probably my favorite part out of this whole painting process. So I was mixing together some brown, olive green, and black, and also some white to create this more grayish color. And then I started working on painting the trees in the mountains that are more in the front. So I was using my really tiny long brush from Arteza, and I just started dotting some trees on top of the mountain. And I mostly focused on creating these taller dots instead of just these perfect circle shapes. So they would of course look more like trees. And of course, this part of the painting is really far away, so make sure to make them small enough, and you can make them bigger when you go lower in the painting, and that's what I did. I would like to think that the darker details that we added to this mountain are almost these thicker forests, so I wanted to add more trees next to them. And the lighter areas are areas where the light is hitting more, of course, because there is less forests and less trees in those parts. So I tried to work adding the trees pretty much everywhere, but still focusing on the bigger tree like forests in those spots where we had more black. And I'm also just blending some of the trees together a little bit because I feel like some of the little dots looked a little bit too defined to my liking. It didn't really look like an organic forest or anything. So I just used again a damp brush and a little bit more water and just mixed things together a bit more. As you can see, when you start adding more trees, the painting will start coming together a lot faster. You definitely have to have some patience when you are working on the trees because this step takes a little while to do, but at the same time, I think it's really therapeutic to work on these small details, especially when you see that the painting really starts to look more alive each time you put the brush onto the paper. Besides the darker trees that I added with my small brush, I also added some lighter dots on the forest to maybe make the forest a little bit more interesting and also autumnal. And after that, I also added some orangey dots to of course show that the forest is turning orange because of autumn. As you can see, the darker orange looks a little bit bland by itself, so I decided to add some lighter orange on top so it would look a little bit more interesting and the orange would pop out a little bit more. But with that, my background for this painting is all done. It definitely took quite a while, and if you are painting with me, you probably know that as well. But if you got this far and you're painting with me, good job, I believe in you. And the next part is gonna be a little bit easier in my opinion. But now take some drinks, have a little break if you want to. I am definitely drinking my tea. But the next part is all about adding the full-on autumnal vibes in this painting. So I'm mixing this brownish orange juice a little bit later, and I'm first just focusing on making the lower part of this painting a little bit darker. My toxic trait is not mixing enough color, and that happens to me all the time. It happened to me again, and what I do when that happens, well, I just mix a lot more water into my almost non-existent color, and then the whole paint looks really transparent on the paper, and that happened to me as well. I was just too lazy to mix more color, so yeah, we're going with it. It looks painful. I'm just trying to add the color to the paper, but we are getting there. So yeah, I mixed this really dark brown, green, gray, black tone for the bottom of my painting to paint some trees on top. Here's some real-time footage of me painting the first pine tree in this painting, and I'm just trying to make my branches really loose and messy. I'm not gripping my brush too hard. I'm just trying to make it look more organic and natural like that. Now I'm covering all of the rest of the white areas in this painting, and of course no forest looks flat, so I need to add a lot of treetops in the painting. And of course, I'm going to be painting a lot of orange trees on top of these, so don't worry about the smaller details too much at this point. You might be wondering why I painted the base for the forest black if I'm going to be having a lot of orange trees in there, and this is just the background color for my forest. So you can see in the reference photo, we have a lot of these orange trees, but they're all blending into the black color that is underneath. Because of course this forest is going to be really deep, there's going to be a lot of shadows, and some of the shadows are as harsh as black. There's also a lot of these almost silhouette looking black trees in the forest, but most of the trees are this orange color, and it's almost this striking orange that is coming out from the black. So I thought it was a better idea to first just make the whole background black and start adding the really light orange shades on top. But I'm just right now working on this brownish orange, which is a lot darker, but we're going to be adding a lot more lighter orange tones on top of them too. So at this point, I was just kind of focusing on painting the trees everywhere. I'm not really looking at the reference photo anymore. I'm not trying to look the placement for all of the trees. I also think that I made the trees a little bit smaller than in the reference photo, but you can of course make them bigger if you want to. This definitely was a bit of a struggle, but I tried to take more freedom with this one instead of just really staring at my reference photo trying to make it perfect. By the way, I just want to say to you that if you're feeling like your painting isn't turning that nice and you're just not liking it, it's totally okay. None of us are perfect at painting and we all make mistakes. And if you're now being like, well, yeah, but you're so much better than me, I have also been there when I started painting. I remember painting from tutorials a lot, and there were so many times when I was painting and they just didn't turn out good, and I had to start my painting over like 4 different times. But one thing that I learned from that time is I did not give up, and I'm amazed at how much patience I actually had back then, because I would not have the same patience now. So even if you are not painting the most beautiful picture and you're not really loving it, I just want to say that even more about tells you the fact that you are still going and you're not giving up. So don't focus on how your painting looks, just focus on painting. Instead of just these really obvious tree shapes, I'm also adding these random little lines and dots in the forest so it looks more natural and organic. So you know that I talked about the orange trees kind of blending into the black color that is underneath. I then just took my damp brush and mixed some of the black that is underneath to the trees that are orange. So the bottom layers of the trees are a little bit more blended. At this point, it still looks a little bit messy, but I'm just adding that same orange to the bottom of the trees to make the blend from the orange to the black a little bit less obvious. I'm also using just straight black to darken some of the parts of the forest, since at this point it looked a little bit too bland in my opinion. The next step is the one step that I think really brings this painting to life, because I'm mixing a little bit more white to my orange paint to start adding those same little details on top of the trees that I added in the tree in the background. So as you can see, I'm mainly adding the really light orange color to the top of the trees, and it really makes the painting look more vibrant, and it also brings all of the colors to life. And at this point, I think it looks really pretty that I added a bunch of different shades of orange as the tree colors, because even though they have the same kind of highlight shade, they still look really interesting and the forest doesn't look as one-dimensional anymore. When I was done with my first lighter layer for the trees, I added a little bit more white into the mix to create this almost white looking orange. It's of course not white, but in this painting it kind of looks white because there is so many darker colors in it. So I'm just adding it to the branches again, and I'm just adding a little bit more of these lighter details in the forest. But that is going to be it for this painting. I had a lot of fun painting this, and it was also kind of like a learning lesson for me as well, because I'm not really that familiar with mountains or forest either. So I really hope you had a lot of fun if you did paint together with me. I really hope you created a beautiful painting that you are proud of, or at least you learned something new if it didn't work out perfectly as you wanted. If you painted with me, I would love to see any kind of recreations, so definitely tag me if you're sharing your painting anywhere online. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, leave a thumbs up and leave a tree emoji down in the comments if you are still here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!